niveau die Scheißkirche steht. Mehmet Ali sen gideceksin önde. Yoran'la yol. Tamam hadi.
O Beyköy'ler şunlarla falan Serdar'ların direkt. Görünüşte o kaçınlardan bu.
Jackie? Hayırlılar makam araması. Çünkü benim arabam. Sikti anasını gene.
Kanada'ya gidelim arkadaşlar.
Öbür cüpler nereye gitti ufaklar? O ufaklar nereye gitti? Öndeki kumandalar.
Yes. Good. Maybe Greek shot you.
Ve bu bölgede buradan buraya şeylere
Dışarı. Baksın ben sana. Buraya koy, buraya. Buraya dışarı isterim. Buraya.
Çekiliyor mu Fuat Bey?
Ha çekiyorlar bizi. Gel çeksin yanına.
Estağfurullah. Ben oyna.
Duran. Temiz.
Venga, mano. Dale.
Daha yüzdesi bulun bizim camiye doğru gidelim. Çabuk gelsinler. Neredeyse.
They used to here, and on the personnel.
Bakma orası. Geç. Oturun bu yana doğru. Biraz önce çekelim ayağını.
When you reach there, go down to the new location.
Nicosia to the southern city of Limassol, and the big resort city of Famagusta, taken yesterday by the Turks, is calm. Here are two reports by satellite.
This is the Turkish Army's front line position overlooking Nicosia, and for the third day it was a noisy and busy place as Turkish jets bombed and strafed Greek Cypriot positions on the edge of the city. The Turkish air attacks came sporadically but swiftly. The main targets were Greek Cypriot police and National Guard buildings, and above all the airport, where there was some heavy fighting today. The bombing seemed aimed at demoralizing the Greek Cypriots even more, rather than preparing for a new attack. The men dug in here showed no sign of advancing any further. The Turks appear to be content with holding the northern part of Nicosia, where the Turkish population lives, willing to leave the rest of the capitals of the Greek community. Across the island from here to the eastern coast, it was a similar scene. After 3 days of fighting this week, Turkish soldiers are preparing for a long stay. Finally, Famagusta, the old walled city, the main goal of the Turkish drive to the east. There has been heavy fighting for the beautiful port city. Turkish tanks advanced from outside the walls, while inside 12,000 Turkish Cypriots, their food running low, waited to be rescued. And last night, they were. Today, Turkish soldiers moved through the Greek part of the city, where a few snipers were putting up a last futile resistance. This is the second time Turkish forces have captured Famagusta. The first, in 1571, the Turkish army stayed here 307 years. The Turks aren't saying how long they plan to remain this time. After 3 days of an unstoppable offensive, the Turkish army seems to have grabbed just about all the land it wants on Cyprus, at least in the northern and northeastern parts of the island. But in the west, the Turkish offense isn't over yet. John Palmer reports.
Less than 3 hours before the latest ceasefire was scheduled to go into effect, the Turkish army opened up with tank and artillery fire on Greek Cypriot positions near the Nicosia airport. Smoke from the battle rose high over the capital city. The Greek Cypriots, sizably outnumbered by the Turks, were able to put up little resistance. To the west, Turkish jet fighter planes repeatedly bombed the outskirts of the town of Morphu on the coast. Most of the villagers had fled to the mountains only hours before the bombing began. Power lines were destroyed, and scores of homes and shops were reduced to rubble. Despite Turkish claims that Morphu had been captured by its forces at mid-morning Friday, no Turkish troops were to be seen in the town. Only 1 or 2 people hastily loading trucks and buses with all the belongings they could carry. The Greek Cypriots, civilians and soldiers alike, had left this town. There was no one here to resist when the Turks did arrive. Further up the road, inside the Turkish lines, the landscape was littered with burned-out Greek Cypriot tanks and trucks. Farm animals who had been deserted by their civilian owners just 3 weeks ago wandered aimlessly in search of food. When the radio here broadcast the news that Greece was not prepared to intervene militarily on the island of Cyprus, what was left of the Greek Cypriot resistance collapsed altogether. John Palmer, NBC News, Cyprus.
Doesn't mean they're filming.
Amerikan.
What is your name?
Kemendi yani. Ne geliyor lan?
Hadi koza kapatıp havalandıra.
It's fairly small guns, aren't they? Small shells. Yes. But even so, the force of it's incredible. Can you in fact see the gun position?
thank you very much. Because I'm here, I want to write a...
Eso no es uno, no. E cazzo sto bucato, un po' da prima di chiasse. Perché sto di chiasse? Sto mi indegno bucato.
Ne vado verso una camicia.
Nada de tare canale.
Hello? You're from Nicosia. What are you doing in Nicosia?
Yes, thank you very much. St Andrews. Hello, Valentine. All right. Film them, okay?
These are the Troodos Mountains, 30 miles west of Nicosia. For the past few weeks, these mountains have provided a sanctuary for tens of thousands of Greek Cypriots who were forced to flee their villages in the face of the Turkish advance. Some of the families have lived in these mountains for a month. The fortunate ones had tents to bring along. The others sleep in their cars or under trees and eat what food the others will share with them. Many of these people lived along the so-called Green Line in Nicosia, the boundary separating the Greek and Turkish communities. Fierce fighting was reported in Nicosia in the 2 days before the ceasefire went into effect. One woman said, "In one way, we don't want to go home because we're afraid we will find everything is gone." Another refugee left 4,000 pigs on his farm. The Turkish soldiers won't let him return to his village to feed them. The only touch with the outside world is through the radio. Weeks ago, all available hotel rooms and cottages in the mountains were taken by the first wave of refugees. Their cars jam the roadways. Some of the rooms are accommodating as many as 15 or 20 people. More than
A church some miles away turned out to be the effective prison of nearly 200 Greek Cypriots. Mostly elderly, they appeared generally to be in good spirits. But as he talked, the prince heard of a 14-year-old boy evidently wounded in the head in the recent fighting.
He's the only boy here who has a bullet which has not been removed. Let's just put him in our car, take him, get the thing done. He's obviously quite well, he can walk, so it's not very serious. We take him back.
Ahan Bey diyor ki bunu götürebilir miyiz hastaneye çıkarsınlar.
We take it out and then we send him back under our protection. All right? Very good. You come with us.
On promise of returning the boy, medical treatment for Georgi Ayasis seemed assured. But another Turkish officer had different ideas. Prince Aga Khan or no.
Come on. Take care. No.
So, despite objections from a UN officer and the UN's High Commissioner for Refugees, Georgi Ayasis was marched back to captivity. The Turkish army had asserted its authority.